revealed through documentary storytelling. We'll have time for Q&A and closing remarks, and then the end of the session, a wrap up. So here's our website. Obviously, you all have found the website and heard about our brown bags, so thank you. The research team in the management department started our journey to understand the refugee crisis in 2016. There was a call from the Journal of Vocational Behavior for us to try and understand workplace issues with the refugee population. And so that resulted in a publication in 2018. And in 2021, we're now up to 30 faculty and students. So we started the center back in 2018, 2019, and it's just rolling along. We have a tremendous team growing here. Our efforts include volunteer efforts, student volunteer efforts, scholarship, as well as teaching. And our vision is to be the nexus for the collaborative and interdisciplinary production of thought and application of social sciences and humanities, a mouthful, but that's really important, right? It's interdisciplinary and it's data-driven, right? Research-based practices to promote the economic flourishing of refugees and immigrants in Northeast Ohio. Again, here's our amazing team. I just flashed that up there. You can hit pause once it's recorded. But Grace Huang and I are co-directors. Ben Barron, Tracy Porter, Soren Valchea, and I were the initial founders with the co-authors with that first publication. And I have to put a shout out to Heather Schlesinger, who is the reason why this is going live, why this is being recorded, and she's just amazing. So thank you to everybody on our team. So the introductions will be done by Allison Robichard, and I'll let this turn it over to her. Allison.
Thanks very much. Happy to be able to join you and sort of more formally introduce Cigdem Slankard, who is currently the interim director for the School of Film and Media Arts and a documentarian. And as noted, she's been connecting up with refugee communities and is herself an immigrant, as am I, as a matter of fact. I emigrated from the Great White North. And so, though I didn't have the same kinds of language difficulties and cultural difficulties, I will say that Canadians and Americans are known to be different from one another. So, and people continuously comment on how I say a boot, even though that's not quite how I say it. And so Cigdem has done some really interesting work with documentary storytelling. And so I'm just going to let her go ahead and tell us about it today. Cigdem?
Thank you so much, Allison. And thank you everyone for attending this presentation. It's my pleasure to present. Yes, I'm a film professor. I'm a trained filmmaker. I'm also the administrator here at the film school. But this specific presentation is really about my work as a filmmaker, as a documentarian. So my recent creative audio work rests on 3 prongs. These include documentary storytelling, media as a form of art, and community engagement. I believe documentary storytelling has the power to inform and engage an audience and has the potential to lead to meaningful social impact, which is really what I aspire to do as a media artist. So on this slide, we see sort of posters of some of the films I have made in the recent, I'd say 7 years or so. As a storyteller, I focus on stories of marginalized groups with a specific focus on refugee communities. And through my work as a filmmaker, I comment on my environment and focus on conformity, assimilation of power, as I examine social, cultural, and political identities. Next slide. And so the previous slide showed maybe 6 or 7 projects that I had finished. 3 of them specifically are about refugee communities. So in the past 5 years, some of these films have looked at issues such as housing, urbanism, identity and belonging, with a specific focus on refugee and immigrant stories. So this body of work presents a cinematic inquiry into questions about home and identity within the United States. So these three specific films, Fresh Start, Breaking Bread, and Dreamhood, are the ones that specifically explore refugee communities and their stories. And so in this presentation, I'll talk about each one in a little more detail. But before that, there are a few other things I would like to say. So through this inquiry, I just said, like, it's a cinematic inquiry into the meaning of home. So I'm really looking at, what does home mean? What does identity mean? And these are things that are often fluid, and they can be redefined. When we move from one place to another, sometimes we redefine what our home is. Sometimes our identities change as we change as people. So we redefine ourselves as people. So I look at migration and how migration really affects the redefinition of home and identity through documentary storytelling. So as the daughter of a Crimean Tatar refugee family and as an immigrant in the United States myself, issues of displacement as well as redefining one's home and identity have been core questions I needed to examine in my own life from a very early age. Next slide, please. So this is a photo from 1947. This is my family. So the little girl with the bow on her head in the middle is my mom. And they are in a refugee camp or a displaced persons camp in Alberschwende in Austria. And my mom was born in that refugee camp, and then they resettled in Turkey. So I always say I was born and raised in Turkey, which is true, and identify as a Turkish woman, Turkish American woman. But also I am the daughter of this family, and I was really raised by these stories of displacement and the idea of redefining home and reinventing oneself, figuring out their identity. And in fact, one thing about this picture, when I was a little girl, my grandmother, who is the adult woman in the picture, she watched me a lot. I was her youngest granddaughter, and she was a caregiver for me for a long time. And I know of this clock. In the center of that table, you see this dog that holds a little clock in its mouth. This was one of their possessions in their family home in Crimea. This is something that they took with them as they left home and carried to a refugee camp and eventually took a picture with that in the center. So as you can probably imagine, stories like that as a little girl, you wonder about that dog, you wonder about that clock, and it sounds like a distant memory, which it is. And then once you become an adult and you have clocks and possessions of your own in your own house, that takes a different kind of meaning. The fact that my grandmother most likely packed this little dog clock up and she wanted to have it with her, even though she would no longer have her home or anything else that's in it, pretty much. Next slide, please. So the family, as I said, these stories of displacement, stories of families that are torn apart, never to be united again, and stories of identity and its shifting meaning from generation to generation. We see my mom in the stroller and my grandmother and grandfather behind it. I think about my grandmother's identity, my mother's identity, mine, and then finally my own. And how do those things shift? So next slide, please. There you go. So this is a funny picture. This is me with my books in grad school. This is me being an immigrant, moving here with 2 suitcases, and it seems like I've acquired, this is 3rd year of grad school, so I'm cheating a little bit, but I moved here with about a one-way ticket, 2 suitcases, and now I end up, of course, having lived here for 20 years, becoming an American citizen. Next slide now. And you see that life changes and one changes along with that. And so that's me registering to vote. This is in 2017. I had never filed to become a citizen before then, but did so in 2016 and became a citizen in 2017 and have voted in every election that I could, Turkish and American. Next slide. Okay, so looking at this background, it's no wonder that, I am interested in these refugee stories. But I will also say, as a creator, you don't really set out to say, like, what are some core issues to me? I want to make films about them. It doesn't really work that way for me anyway. So I started making films. I was compelled by certain topics, compelled by certain stories, drawn to certain people, and started exploring. And then later on, those dots sort of got connected, and I ended up having a coherent body of work and a vision as a filmmaker. And what I find most compelling about this body of work is that there is a coherent story of resilience, of hope, and optimism that emerge time after time. There's a lot of nuance to refugee communities and to their stories, to their struggles. But it's also true that there is this very strong story of resilience that comes out. And a big chunk of my work is really about that micro approach, looking at a specific community, looking at a character and learning their story, and really not essentially moving away from this idea of looking at refugees as a monolithic entity, but really looking at every individual as an individual, right? So that's what the films are about for the most part. But then after I do all of that, in the end, there is this unifying story of resilience, which is absolutely amazing to me. Next slide. Okay, so the first film is, so this is the first refugee focused film I made, called Fresh Start. This film is only 30 minutes long. It was released in 2017. Those of us who may not be familiar with film production, films take a long time to make, especially if you're also a faculty member, and if you're not making the film full time. But this specific film chronicles the lives of a refugee farm community in rural New Hampshire. So this collective of refugee and immigrant farmers are participating in the New American Sustainable Agriculture Project. So in this project, there are 20 farmer entrepreneurs representing the Somali, Bantu, Bhutanese, Burundi, and Congolese communities, as well as other ethnic groups. Most members of the small community came to the United States with one marketable skill, which is farming. So next slide, please. So Fresh Start is the story of these farmers with no farm, examining the new American identity, the value of land and food in a brave new world. And I was drawn to the story. I had some connections in New Hampshire. Like, I had a place to stay. I kind of wanted a reason to go there, I think. So I heard about this farm on The World, PRI's The World, and approached the farm and gained access and traveled to New Hampshire 4 times to film this short project. What was very interesting is that you come to this country as a refugee. Sometimes none of the skills that you have are applicable here. Some of them are, but it's possible that many of your skills are not. Everything is different, including starting from the way you do dishes to, the way you transport yourself, the way you buy your food. And so farming for these families became this one thing that they could really keep, something that they related to from, the first half of their lives to now. Next slide, please. Here we see some stills from the film. And as I mentioned, it took 4 trips. I wanted to film the farm across 4 seasons. And we did. It was quite challenging to actually gain the trust of the community. It was very challenging to really get this story. I could have made a film that would be like, I would just interview some people who are in charge of the farm and making the program, getting the grants and things like that. But really to tell a story that was, that told us who the farmers were was a challenge, but I persevered, and we will take a quick look pretty soon. Next slide, please. Okay. Okay, so it's a 13-minute film. I queued it up to half points. Let's look at a few minutes of it just to give you a feel for it.
I like to eat those products. It's very good for us. We remember our country.
Well, yeah, we don't have like American meals. Like my sisters, they make it like once in a while for themselves, but when my mom cooks, she makes like traditional food, like rice, plantain, and like fufu. You know what fufu is? Yeah, she makes that. She uses like some of the vegetables and stuff that she gets from here.
Well, me, I like eating burritos and taquitos and chimichangas.
That's my chimichangas.
Where do you get that food?
Sam's Club.
I like my food, but my kids don't like it. Only like it Dunkin' Donuts stuff.
Tell me what to get at Sam's Club and how you prepare it, and what does it taste like? Describe it to me.
It's just a burrito. My family no live here. A lot my family gone now, all die. My uncle, my mama, my mom too die. Somebody killed. One night, coming big gun. All take food, stuff, all fighting. My husband brother coming. Why you talk to him? People don't have money, don't have nothing. Last night take all his stuff, all take food. Why you come now fighting? My husband brother take knife, take here, tirik, he still die. Me only I have Rahma here. Me cry, my husband cry. Me, my husband, I go, come Africa. Still Dadaab. I coming Africa. 3 more day, 4 more day, no eat, no bora, no nothing. Still walking, me and my husband. Walking. I come Africa, cry. Still my family, a lot die. A lot my mom sister, my mom too die. A lot people. That's why I don't know. Somali Bantu don't have money. Only do this one, farm. Somali Bantu don't have money. Working all day, farm, come back again. Somalia same, but I don't know. Still 25 years old, big trouble. Every day people die.
When there is conflict like that, everybody who come from that side can be, a target. So it wasn't safe to stay there when, they have been, targeting some group of people. So it was safe to leave.
I don't want to go back there. It's dangerous. Of all our fighting and stuff going on, I don't want to die. And because they have no American food there.
So I think that's a good place to stop it. So I chose this segment because, actually, let me try to, okay, so Vicky, if you're good, okay. I chose this segment because it shows us very mundane things like kids wanting to eat Dunkin' Donuts and burritos, frozen burritos from Sam's Club or something like that. And the mom's sort of mundane annoyance with that, like my kids, they don't want to eat my food, and my kids don't want to eat my food either, by the way. So I think that seems to be a universal almost thing. But then from that, in the same exact setup, we talk about her trauma, what she experienced, what really forced her. Khalija is the character's name that we meet in this scene. So we hear what forced her out of that, the level of trauma, which is not really, sometimes it's hard to watch, but I was very grateful that she shared that story with me. And I also absolutely love the way she speaks to me. Like I think maybe because I've worked with so many refugee women, I love what happens to language when, you know, I mean, I would say she's fluent, but she, you know, has a sort of, she makes maybe simpler sentences, shorter sentences, but she expresses exactly what she wants to say. So it really becomes this like core communication of what she wants to say, the essence of what she's saying. And it takes this sort of poetic, you know, tone for me, you know, Somali Bantu don't have money. Somali Bantu only do this one, working all day, farm. And, you know, I mean, so that's one of the things that I learned where like working with refugee families and sometimes language, that was something that I wasn't expecting as a filmmaker to find in this film. And it was a good surprise, and it's not the only film that we found this in. So Vicky, if we could just see next slide. Yeah. So I just put these, yeah, let's go through two of these. Yeah, 1 and 2. The next slide. Yeah. So I put a list of the screenings that this film was in, you know, from Italy. It was in a traveling festival in Caribbean and Africa. In Paris, in Denmark, Slovakia, Turkey, New Hampshire, Colorado, New Mexico. Let's see, I'm just talking about countries here, Turkey. And if you look at this, the very first screening of it was at CSU, which I was very grateful for. This is my first year at CSU as an assistant professor in 2017. So what I wanted to say about the screenings is that it's a very small story. It looks at a very specific group in a small town in New Hampshire, but the story resonated globally in many other countries. So partly because the story of refugees is really prevalent all over the world. And as my own history sort of demonstrates, goes back a long time as well. Next slide. So Dreamhood is our second film that's exploring refugees. And I should say, you know, there's so many different types of film production. Typically films are produced with big crews. Both of these films, both Fresh Start and Dreamhood, are collaborations between myself and my husband, Mark Slankard, who's a faculty member here at the Department of Art and Design. So we work as a team of 2, and that allows us to get close to the people. So you're not going with big lights, big cameras, you know, big crews. It gives us flexibility as far as transportation and being able to do the things that we are doing. So that has been a big component of the work. But Dreamhood, yeah, this was released in 2020. It's a feature-length documentary which examines life in the International Village neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio, and captures the transformation of a community as a neighborhood is revitalized and a community continues to grow in terms of size and diversity. So here we see in this image, this is a still from the film, but we're seeing a vacant lot that used to be the site of the family home. A home was abandoned, eventually blighted, eventually torn down, and then you have this empty lot. What happens to it? So these people are essentially trying to keep the empty lots in their community clean. A lot of them are turned into community gardens in this specific neighborhood. So I do want to talk a little bit about the project that the film depicts, which is called the International Village Project. So it's rooted in the near West Side neighborhoods of Stockyard and Clark Fulton. And it intends to transform these 2 neighborhoods still burdened by the aftermath of the foreclosure crisis. These neighborhoods are marked by blighted properties in disrepair and vacant homes with boarded up windows. So the project's objective is to revitalize and repopulate these once bustling neighborhoods by providing quality housing for immigrant and refugee families resettling in Cleveland. So it's essentially a story about neighborhood revitalization through refugee resettlement. Next slide. So the film follows longtime residents as well as newcomers within the international village. The overarching objective is to provide a forum for the complex yet relatable story of the refugee communities in Cleveland. This film was partially funded by the City of Cleveland's Cable Television Minority Arts and Education Fund, which is a grant that has a very long name granted by the Cleveland Foundation. And then this image is, I mean, I think you can see what's happening, right? An overgrown vacant lot, and they can't even mow it. They have to go at it with machetes to, whack it down. This is right here in Cleveland, on the west side, like East 40s, basically. Next slide. So let's take a look at the trailer for that. By the way, I should ask, was the projection okay? Give me a thumbs up if that was okay.
Neighborhoods are very place-based at a time when the internet allows us to go anywhere and be part of anything all over the whole world. You still have to walk out your front door and go somewhere, And so the more we can do to make each neighborhood an appealing place to actually live, the better off we will all be.
In the beginning, it was that neighborhood and that neighborhood and that neighborhood over and over and over again. Police are telling you of incidents that are occurring. The fire department's telling you there's a structure on fire. EMS is telling you somebody OD'd. Those are the worst nights. Those are the worst hours, because during the day, there's other things that are happening. You can factor it in the middle of the night, that's what's going on. And as the calls happened less, the residents started to get even more excited about it because they realized there was a connection. And the connection is that when people move into your community, regardless of where they're from, your neighborhood's gonna be better. There will be more life. There will be less crime, less opportunity for things that could go wrong. And that, to me, was the part where I started to see the tide really turn.
That's why America is so great, because you get here, even if you're different, you meet so many people who are different also, and when you come together, you're different, building something beautiful. That's what I see, that's America for me.
So this is a trailer, a 2-minute trailer for a 70-minute film. Let's see the next slide. And this film was, features are, they're kind of harder to program because they, take a lot more space in a film festival. But we've had interesting screenings in Austria, all around the US, really, France, and I just got an email from someone in Indonesia. IOM, based in Indonesia, would like to program this film as part of their film festival. Again, I share this because, I've dedicated a lot of my work to telling stories that are from our neighborhoods, that are right here within my reach. But as a filmmaker, it's so important to get that story beyond Cleveland, right? So, it's been an interesting journey to observe that. So let's do the next slide. So this is another project, Breaking Bread. This one is 20 minutes, and it's actually 360 video, if you're familiar with that type of format. So essentially you take a camera, and the camera films everything in the room. So it has a spherical view. If you think about a traditional film, you're always framing something within the frame, right? Within the rectangle, and you are choosing to include and exclude things. So this format, we're working in 360 or spherical video, essentially films everything within the room. So it's a very different type of cinematic storytelling. And the power of this has been actually talked about as empathy machine. So it is, there are a lot of projects produced for UN in 360, mostly because that's one way you can sort of transport someone someplace, you know. I'm interested in, so I wanted to, with this project, okay, so it's a VR documentary exploring the multifaceted stories of refugee communities who have recently arrived in Cleveland. So here is on the right, there's the image of the camera. It looks like a ball. So the overarching objective of this project is to generate a deeper understanding of the global refugee crisis and its immediate effects on American cities. The project approaches the refugee experience at a micro level, focusing on smaller communities as opposed to refugees as a monolithic entity. Through this more focused and character-driven approach, the film conveys the uniqueness of each story and reveal the complicated and pluralistic nature of the underlying theme. Next slide. So these are, I included some stills. I will not show a clip from this. It doesn't lend itself well to sharing on Zoom, but I am happy to share a link if anyone is interested in seeing the film in its entirety. So here we are with a family from Burma who have come here. They live in Lakewood now. So the project, we basically have a meal with 4 different families. And we put the camera in the center of the dinner table and share a meal, talk about the food, talk about their stories, talk about their dreams. So the project really talks about this duality of like how different people from us and also how similar, you know, they're different because they have experienced these traumas. They had to find a new home, but they're similar because, you know, at the end of the day, what we want for our families, for our children, good health, good futures, you know, options for success. Those are pretty common goals. So this project was sort of connecting, you know, trying to bring someone who may not know a refugee family into the, you know, into the dining room of a refugee family. Next slide. So this is the kitchen view of, again, the family from Burma. And next one. Here we are. This is Hariti. She is from Eritrea, and, you know, pretty significant trauma that she has also experienced. And so Eritrean refugee, and I will plug in their new restaurant. So they opened a new place, Habesha Kitchen. It's at Cam's Corner. So highly recommended. The food was excellent. So it's very much like Ethiopian food if you like that. Next slide. Next slide, please. And yeah, and here we are at the home of a refugee family from Afghanistan. So Kudratullah Anwari is the man's name. He's the father of 4 boys. They've come here, now it's been 5 years because he just got his citizenship. And he was a professor of Persian poetry at University of Kandahar. He was abducted by the Taliban, then released, and finally ran away with his family and ended up being a refugee here. When we filmed this, he was it was a tough time for him. He was driving for Uber, and, you know, from being a poetry professor to being an Uber driver. That's what I mean when I say skills not transferring. I just met with him recently, and I think he's at a happier place. He is an owner operator of a semi-truck, and I think he makes better money. And I think that's a little bit better. But he's, you know, that's him sort of, you know, finding that new identity, right? Like not really, you know, sort of parting with the identity of the professor and embracing a new identity with his new profession. So these are the 3 films that we made. in the past few years that explore stories of refugee communities around us. I do have a film in progress that I'm not sharing exactly, but that specifically looks at Congolese refugees who came to Cleveland and who completed this program called Survivors of Torture. So all of the we're filming with 3 families, though the project is vast. I mean, there are 20 families that participated in the Survivors of Torture program. So we're filming with them. And again, it tells the story of this generational shift. The parents are the ones who deeply experienced the trauma. So did the children, but there's this story of hope and resilience. And I'm very proud to say 2 of the characters that we film in this upcoming film are CSU students. One is studying engineering, he's a sophomore, and one is studying nursing, and she's a junior, and from different families. And it's full circle for me as an educator and as a filmmaker, where, it's really nice to be able to give someone your card and say that, hey, if you need anything at CSU, if you have any questions, I may not know the answers, but I will connect you. So that's a work in progress that we hope to complete within the next year. Those are all my slides for the presentation. If you want more information about the work, if you want to watch them, there are links. I have a website, which is basically just my name.com, CigdemSlankard.com. And, I was updated with additional screenings and things like that. If you have any questions, of course, we're glad to hear them. Thank you so much for being here, for listening.
Thank you. Wow. So I want to pause and just reflect on the amazing talent of Cigdem and her husband, and just put a plug for Cleveland State, because we're doing great things that have meaning and that are hopefully making a difference in people's lives and in the lives of our students and the faculty. And so thank you, Cigdem. So I always have plenty to say, but I want to pause and see if we have any questions or comments from others in the audience. Hi, Mark. Cigdem and Mark. Thank you, Mark, for your work too. So Mark, I just want you to know a little bit about how we're operating. It's really organic at the Center for Refugee and Immigrant Success. And we're trying to become a little more systemic, but it's an organic, decentralized, systemic problem that has a lot of moving parts. But we'll get a call from one of the refugee services groups to say, there's an artist who's a refugee and they would love a mentor. And, we send it off to Mark, or, this is what we want to do. Like, we want to make connections. We want to help support. And it might be individual mentoring. It might eventually be courses, whatever we can do. The business school is working on partnering to help entrepreneur refugees with coaching and financial help and marketing help. So it's just growing. And but as we know, Fred Karam spoke last month, and he spoke about the refugee crisis and refugees and immigrants in the literature. We have to keep it in our curriculum, right? We have to keep making sure that these topics are not just studied, but talked about and shown. So please, who else? So for me, I think what's really important is that when I do a study, when I investigate this topic and I interview people, I interview refugees, I'm trying to hear their stories too. But the medium that I then share it is an article, and I can share it in a presentation. And I've been to different places to share what we've learned with students and other faculty. But what's so important about what Cigdem is doing is that the story is much more contextualized and real, and that you feel it, you hear it. It's not a quote that I would get in a qualitative document. So this is so important, the work that they're doing. So Anna Chen says, what is your experience interviewing refugees and building trust with them to share their story? Thank you. Good question, Anna.
It really depends on the person in front of you. I mean, I am who I am. I have a few tricks, of course, but I think an earnest approach, presenting my objective clearly, what it is that I would like to do, and giving them a heads up of what I might need from them, and trying to get buy-in. There are I think the New Hampshire project was hard because I didn't live there. So when I went there, I only had like a day or two to spend and film. But Dreamhood, which is a feature-length film, I mean, like, you kind of become almost friends with these people. You spend, you call them, you touch base, they call you, they come to your screenings, and so you develop a relationship. I think that, to answer the question more directly, I think sort of being upfront about it, being listening, being flexible. If you have a goal in your interview, you want to get a certain thing, but they want to talk about something else, let them, being able to listen and flex with that. And really follow through. If you said that you were going to do something, do it. So earning trust, those have been very helpful for me.
So I just want you to talk real quickly, and there's 3 other amazing questions, but you mentioned earlier when we were planning this session, the notion of storytelling as therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the organic, allowing them to talk about what they want to talk about, to some degree, does that, right?
Absolutely. In fact, the current film that we're working on, that happened. So the person, I asked him to tell me a story. I mean, he went out for 40 minutes, and which is not really a great way to make a film, but so I ended up filming another interview with him after that. And I was very upfront. I said, look, it was really amazing. I learned so much about your story, but I need to film it again and shorter. And I will ask you specific things, and we filmed it again, and he understood. But filmmaking is just like any other interaction. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of benefit in trying to talk people into things that they're not interested in. Like, I don't think that I can make a film about someone who doesn't want to be in the film.
Yeah.
So that's usually, a practice of mine. You get buy-in, and that helps a great deal too.
So Fred's question, it's Jeff, but it says Fred on there, but Jeff Karam, he says, your work is so impressive. You have any city leaders or urban planners seen your films? Your films would seem a vital source for inspiration for them to build a community in both city and rural settings, and how to build a community.
Thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate the kind comment there. So in Dreamhood, you hear Joe Simperman's voice. He was a big supporter of the project from the beginning. The film is shown at Chagrin Documentary Film Festival in our neighborhood. That specific one, actually Fresh Start. Yeah, I don't remember if Fresh Start showed there. But we try to get it to programming here. And whenever we have a screening, of course, I invite all stakeholders, but I don't think it quite made it to the mayor's office or anything like that. What I will say, though, is that with city planning, urbanism, so we have shown in a lot of events that are specifically focused on that. So there's definitely, Better Cities Film Festival or San Francisco Urban Film Festival. So these become almost like conferences where people who are interested in urbanism and people who are making work about that sort of convene. And we have done, we've reached a decent audience, I think, through those events. But thank you.
So what's important about what we're trying to do at Cleveland State is to keep it interdisciplinary, and so that when we share, we're faculty do knowledge sharing and knowledge transfer. And when we do this, we see an opportunity for urban studies, Deirdre Majian, Brian Mickelbank, and Jack Yochum, who are on this, to find a way to connect the dots between what she's doing and what we can do with city planning. That's what we're trying to do here. Yulin Rogers, you mentioned virtual reality in your projects. Can you share more on how you utilize it?
Yeah, so this is my first VR project. So virtual reality is, of course, this technology that the idea is that you are removed from your physical environment. You put in a virtual reality headset, and then you are immersed in whatever environment is presented to you in that headset. In my case, that's a lens-generated environment. So we use a camera to get what the headset basically shows you. And we create that in documentary form. But I teach 2 classes, Interactive Media 1 and 2. So we incorporate this type of film production, spherical film production in those courses. And I actually did 2 fellowships with Oculus, which is really what sort of jump-started my ability to create anything in VR. So if anyone is interested, please send me an email. I'll share with you all I know. But then I don't have the technical skills to create digitally created VR environments. So if you were to play like virtual reality games or other sort of VR experiences. And I am very interested in collaborating with perhaps someone in computer science, someone who does actually have the tech skills to be able to create that, because it's a different area of expertise. You would have to know programming and be able to do that basically. So I've actually developed a project, sort of pitched this. I haven't pushed it too much because number one, I'm in this project and I accepted to serve as the interim director of our school. So I thought it would hold. But there's a project that I would like to do called Where Did You Play, which would be a digitally created VR experience about how neighborhoods changed over time. A neighborhood where someone might have like played with their friends, rode their bikes, are now so dangerous that kids who live there, like they can't play there because it's not safe to do so. So this idea of stories of spaces that we used to play in, throw a football or ride a bike, and what happens to that space. This, again, going back to the idea of stories neighborhoods have. But this project would need to be more interactive. So I would need to actually collaborate with someone who can do that. Like I said, developed this part of a fellowship program, but haven't pushed it forth to actually execute and make it. Yeah, so if there are any computer scientists here, or if you're interested, please do connect me.
Yeah, that's what we need to keep doing. Valerie Temple asked, how difficult is it to edit documentaries like this? Is it hard to cut things for time constraints?
It is, yeah, it's challenging. And so with Dreamhood, I actually work with an editor. And she's based in Portland. So we would send things back and forth. And I think I did one trip there and she came here once to kind of like do big sit down sessions. So that was that. It would take me, it is difficult, it's time consuming. It's a very specific skill. So, but I did edit, I edited Breaking Bread myself. First Start was edited by a different editor. But the most recent short film I finished called Pretty Vacant, which is not part of this presentation, I also did the editing on that. So it depends on how much time I have, what the project is, who I have access to as a collaborator. But I do prefer to work with an editor when it's an option for me. And I think that might have been Allison's question, not Valerie's.
Oh, right. It's yes. Allison.
There you go.
Excuse me. Cigdem, John Basic, who's in occupational therapy. He was a speaker back in the spring about all the great work his students are doing. He says, I love your work. Following up on Jeff's question, I would suggest you reach out to the new mayor's transition team so they can consider refugees in their neighborhood initiatives. Great idea. And that is a word for all of the team, anyone who wants to get involved. That's what Grace and I are trying to do, is be that connecting tissue for you. And as we go meet with deans, as we get to know all the different players in the city, we want to be able to be that resource for you too. So Cigdem, please tell us how we can support your work.
I will just say I'm with the Center for Refugee and Immigrant Success at Cleveland State, and that's not a person, but rather, I am part of a team. So I'd be glad to do that.
Excellent. Anyone else? What a great session. Gosh, thanks everybody for coming. Thank you. So again, the Center for Refugee and Immigrant Success, we continue to plan next year. We're going to have a social this year in December and think about what we want to have on the calendar for next year. If you have ideas, if you want to get involved, please let us know, and we'd love to have you. And we'll see you in January, February for some of our future brown bags. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you everyone for coming. Enjoy the afternoon.